basic premise of the reproductive system is to perpetuate your species. That's the main function, to continue your species. The males produce gametes called sperm cells. Females produce gametes called the ova or the egg. Joining of a sperm and an ovum is what's called fertilization. Fertilization, when it occurs, forms what's called a zygote. Okay. The reproductive system includes gonads, testes in males, ovaries in females. It includes reproductive tract, accessory glands, and perinatal structures like your external genitalia. And we'll go over all that. Okay, principal structure of the male reproductive system of the external genitalia are the scrotum and the penis. Okay, male reproductive system has the testes, the epididymis, the ductus deferens, which used to be called the vas deferens for people who have taken before. It's the same thing. Again, they just like to change the name on things just to keep themselves occupied so that they can do something right. So it's all the ductus deferens, also called the vas deferens, the ejaculatory duct, the spongy urethra, which you talked about a little before, the seminal gland, prostate gland, and the bulbourethral gland. Okay. And you can see in male reproductive system, your accessory glands. You can see where the seminal gland is located, just above or superior to the prostate gland. You can see the prostate gland, okay, which where the urethra feeds into from the urinary bladder, and the bulbourethral gland. The bulbourethral gland is in the membranous urethra, that skinny muscle right in there we talked about. Remember, there's three parts to the male urethra. There's a prostatic urethra, the membranous urethra, and the spongy urethra. The membranous urethra is through the bulbourethral gland. That's where it's located. Okay, the ducts of the reproductive system. You have the ejaculatory duct that feeds off the seminal gland. Okay, that's where the vas deferens, what do they call it now? Ductus deferens feeds into the ejaculatory duct. You see the membranous urethra, the spongy urethra, which we talked about, the ductus deferens, which comes up, and that's what feeds into eventually into this ejaculatory duct, feeds into the urethra. And the epididymis is in the top of the scrotum, above where the sperm cells develop and are fed into the vas deferens or the ductus deferens. Then you have the testes, you have the penis, and you have the scrotum. Okay, that's a cadaver section of it, the same kind of view. You can see the penis and then spongy urethra. And you see the corpus spongiosum, which is one of the erectile tissues where blood fills it, which we'll get into a little bit. You have the epididymis above the testes. You have the testes. Again, the epididymis is where the sperm start to develop and start to mature and feed into the ductus deferens as they travel through. You have the scrotum, which contains the testes. You can see the prostate gland where the urethra runs through. You see the membranous urethra, to that skinny the muscle right there, and the spongy urethra, which runs through the entire penis. Testes hang inside a pouch called the scrotum. It's outside of the body. There's a reason it's outside the body, because the temperature of the sperm have to be cooler than the internal temperature of the body. That's why it has to hang down below the body. We'll get into exact measurements in a little bit here. Testicle size, about 5 centimeters long, 3 centimeters wide, 2.5 centimeters thick, and weigh about 10 to 15 grams. Okay. Again, the same diagram we looked at before, you can see the testes, where they're located. Okay, so here's your testes inside the scrotum, and the scrotum is a sac that surrounds the testes. As the testes descend, okay, during development, your testes form inside the abdominal cavity near your kidneys. They do not form outside the body. They form internally. They travel through what's called the inguinal canal. Okay, you'll need to know that from my exam and a few nursing exams. It's the inguinal canal that the testes descend through. Then the ductus deferens, blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves are bundled with the testes. It's called the spermatic cord that connects the testes back to the internal parts of the body after they descend through the inguinal canal. Okay, here's the temperature requirements. Okay, the testes development require approximately 98.6 degrees. That's body temperature. So as the testicles develop, they have to be inside the body. They cannot be outside. They need a temperature of 90.6 degrees, and they start to descend down as you age. Okay, sperm requires a temperature of 96.6 degrees. That's cooler than body temperature. So the testes have to descend for the sperm to develop. Okay, it has to be cooler. So testes develop inside the bodies, travel through the inguinal canal, sperm develop outside the body because testes require 98.6, sperm require 96.6. So a 2-degree difference. Okay, you can see at 2 months, 4 months, 2 months, 3 months, and 4 months. Okay, you can see your testes right here start to descend down, start to develop. So they develop right by the kidneys and start to descend down as the child ages. Okay, but they develop inside the body. Okay, the somatic cord connects the testes back to the internal part of the body. It consists of the inguinal nerve, ilioinguinal nerve, the genitofemoral nerve, the deferential artery, the ductus deferens, pampiniform plexus, testicular artery, and testicular vein. Right. So here's your inguinal canal. There's a loop right here. This is where the testes descend through that so sperm can develop. Okay. In the somatic cord, you have your genitofemoral nerve, your deferential artery, ductus deferens, pampiniform plexus, and your testicular artery, okay, and also the testicular vein. Okay. The scrotum is divided into 2 chambers called scrotal cavities. They're separated by what's called the perineal raphe that separates the 2 scrotal cavities from one another. It's thickened tissue, it extends from the anus across the scrotum and along the anterior surface of the penis. The tunica vaginalis. This has appeared on every nursing exam I've ever reviewed, all the NCLEX, because as soon as you see it, do you think of male or female? It's got vagina in it. You think of female, and it's not. The tunica vaginalis is a serous membrane that covers the outside of each testes. Okay, I think they did it just for test purposes. They named it like that to see if you're paying attention. Okay, because it makes no sense to name it that, but that's what they named it. Tunica vaginalis is only in the male. Okay, again, you'll see that on your nursing exams. It's a serous membrane, covers the outside of each testes and covers the inside lining of the scrotal cavity. So don't get fooled on that one. Okay, again, the same picture again. You have your scrotal cavity, you have 2 of them, separated by perineal raphe. This is what separates the scrotal cavities, this division right here. Okay, you have the testes, okay, which is covered by the visceral layer of the tunica vaginalis, and you have the parietal layer of the tunica vaginalis. Again, it's like a balloon. You push your fist through a balloon, you have 2 layers surrounding it. You have the outer layer, which is the parietal layer, and the internal layer, which is the visceral layer. Okay, same thing with the tunica vaginalis. There's an inner layer close to the scrotum, then an outer layer. Okay, muscles of the scrotum. You have the dartos muscle. The dartos muscle, when it contracts, causes wrinkling of the scrotum. Okay, when the dartos muscle contracts, the scrotum becomes wrinkled. The cremaster muscle. It tenses the scrotal sac and pulls it closer to the body. If it's cold, you want to keep the sperm developing. You don't want it greater than 2 degrees difference, 96.6. So if the external temperature gets colder, it starts to contract and pull the testes closer to the body to increase the temperature so the sperm can develop at ideal temperatures. Okay. So if it's cold outside, the testes move closer to the abdomen to attain the proper temperature for sperm development. So those 2 muscles, the dartos muscle causes wrinkling of the scrotal surface. The cremaster muscle causes the testes to contract and pull closer to the abdomen to maintain the proper tension for spermatogenesis. Okay. So this is the cremaster muscle. Okay. And this is the dartos muscle. Okay. So the dartos causes wrinkling. The cremaster muscle causes the testes to ascend back towards the abdomen. Okay, the scrotum is highly vascularized. Okay, the internal pudendal arteries, which branches from the internal iliac artery, the external pudendal arteries, which branch from your femoral artery, and your inferior epigastric arteries. Okay, that all branches from your external iliac artery. Okay. The scrotum has nerves. Okay, it comes from the hypogastric plexus, the ilioinguinal nerves, the genitofemoral nerves, and the pudental nerves. All feed into the scrotum. Okay, in the structures, you have the tunica albuginea. Okay, that's the fibrous lining of your testes. It divides into the testes and moves into it and forms different septa, like different lobes inside the testes, where the sperm can develop. So the tunica albuginea extends into the testes and forms walls called septa. The septa converge to what's called the mediastinum in the middle area. The mediastinum supports the ducts that remove the sperm materials towards the epididymis. Once it gets in the epididymis, it goes to the ductus deferens and up into the ejaculatory duct into the urethra. Okay, so that's where it starts. There's tunica albuginea. The tunica vaginalis, which we said, is that fibrous tissue that surrounds the tunica albuginea. It's continuous to the surface tissue of the epididymis. That's the layer that surrounds the testes, the fibrous tissue. Okay, so here's your epididymis. There's all this coiled ductwork right there. That's your epididymis. These are your septa. This comes in and shows you where it divides into each of those lobules into grooves. Those are the walls formed by that connective tissue, by the tunica albuginea. So the tunica albuginea surrounds it and then dives deep into it to form these septa. Septa are basically walls that form different lobes. Okay, and it feeds toward the mediastinum. This is your mediastinum. So the sperm start collecting in here and feed into the epididymis. And from the epididymis, they feed into your ductus deferens. Okay, you can see your tunica vaginalis, which is the outer coating right here. Remember, there's a peritoneal layer and a visceral layer, because there's two, just like punching, like a balloon surrounding it. You have two layers, the closest to the organ and furthest away from the organ. Okay, so the septa, the walls in the testes, separate the testes into lobules. So you have different sections. Each lobule contains what's called seminiferous tubules. Okay, these seminiferous tubules begin to uncoil and lead to a straight tubule. So the seminiferous are all these coiled tubules. They start to straighten out and they lead to the mediastinum area. Okay, that's what we saw right before we went into the epididymis. So the straight tubules interconnect with each other to form what's called a reedy testes. That's the area referred to. The reedy testes connect to your efferent ductules. Efferent means what? Remember, you have afferent and efferent, just like a nervous system. Afferent is coming in, efferent is going out. Same with the reproductive system. Efferent ductules are ductules going out away from the testes. Okay, and they feed into the epididymis. Okay, so here's your mediastinum area, like we said. You can see this, the seminiferous tubules are all wound around here and they start to straighten out right here. They feed into the reedy testes. Okay, and these reedy testes feed into the epididymis. And you get through the efferent ductules that drain into the epididymis, the outgoing ductules. So the reedy testes are in the mediastinum area of the testes. All right, there's a space between the coils of these seminiferous tubules. Remember, all these tubes coil all around, all the sperm develops before they kind of straighten out and feed up into the mediastinal area, into the epididymis. Okay, inside those spaces around all these coiled tubes are what's called interstitial cells. These interstitial cells are extremely important. Those are what produce and release testosterone. Okay, so the interstitial cells that are located within these seminiferous tubules, they're in between the spaces between them. That's what releases testosterone, is your interstitial cells. Okay, and you can see what the interstitial cells look like right here. That's a light microscope picture of the interstitial cells in the spaces around the seminiferous tubules as they coil around. Right? And testosterone. What does testosterone do? It stimulates spermatogenesis, allows sperm to develop, promotes sperm maturation. Okay? When sperm are first developed, they're not activated. It prefers them to mature so they can be activated, so they can form the different sections: the head, the body, and the tail. Okay? They have to form those three sections. Maintains accessory organs. Okay? Okay? Develops secondary sexual characteristics. It stimulates growth and development, and it stimulates sexual behavior and sexual drive. Spermatogenesis. As we develop sperm, we also have meiosis. Remember, we talked about mitosis. Mitosis and meiosis are different. Mitosis is the replication of cells. Like one cell gives two daughter cells, cell gives two daughter cells, and that's how the body grows. That's how your cells replace one another. Meiosis is forming gametes or sex cells. Remember, there's two types of cells in the body. There's somatic cells, which are all the regular cells, and there's sex cells. Because sex cells cannot have the same chromosome count. In mitosis, every cell developed in the human has 46 chromosomes. Okay? Every species is different, but humans have 46. Okay? If the sperm cell had 46 and the egg cell had 46 and they got together, they'd have 92 chromosomes, which is not compatible with life. Okay? So mitosis is a duplication of the cell. Meiosis is a duplication of the cells, reducing the chromosome count by half. So in the final form of the cell, the sex cell, there's 23 chromosomes, both in the sperm and the eggs. So meiosis and mitosis are different. They go through the same phase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, but they split the chromosomes at the second stage without duplicating them like they do in the mitosis. So the chromosomes are not duplicated and then they split, giving you 23 and giving you a mixture of genetic material from both paternal and maternal from the original cell. So it allows for genetic diversity and it allows for fertilization to occur where you don't go over the number of chromosomes that are required for life. Okay, so that's the difference between mitosis and meiosis. Spermatogenesis is making sperm cells. That's just sperm, and then genesis is life, making of something. So making of sperm cells, formation of sperm cells. Meiosis, okay, meiosis produces sperm cells. Okay, it also produces the egg also. Meiosis starts in the outer layers of your seminiferous tubules right before they start to straighten out. Spermatogonia, those are stem cells that become sperm cells. Remember, sperm develop throughout your whole life. So as they develop, you got to make sure you don't get rid of your sperm cells. So the first step is to split. One goes into being a sperm, one goes back into being another stem cell. Because you can't get rid of your stem cells. You got to keep replenishing those. So as it split, one goes off to the sperm to become the haploid, which is half the chromosome. The other goes into making a stem cell. So you're always replenishing your stem cells as they're developing sperm cells. Okay? And that's spermatogonia. Spermatogenesis is the formation of sperm. Spermatogonia is the stem cells that are constantly being replenished and form into your sperm cells. Okay? So at sexual maturation, the spermatogonia divide. Okay? This is with the beginning of meiosis. One of the cells produced remains in the outer layer of seminiferous tubules as a stem cell. So when they divide, one of them stays a stem cell. The other one goes on to develop into sperm cells. That way you're always replacing, like we said, you're always replacing your layer of stem cells. So the other cell becomes a primary spermatocyte. That's the beginning of meiosis. Okay, this primary spermatocyte starts to undergo meiosis. Okay. Meiosis is associated with the formation of sperm, called spermatogenesis, developing sperm. The primary spermatocyte divides into two secondary spermatocytes. Okay, so far it's just like neuromitosis. The primary one goes to a secondary one. Now this is a difference. The secondary one produces 4 sperm cells, spermatids they're called, and they're haploids. It cuts the chromosome count down to 46. So it duplicates the chromosomes, and instead of making 4, duplicates the chromosome, and instead of splitting into 2, it splits into 4. So that secondary spermatocyte splits into 1. It duplicates its chromosomes like normal, splits into 2 daughter cells, and each of those daughter cells split into 2 more cells without reproducing the chromosomes, without duplication. So that creates what's called a haploid sperm cell. Haploid sperm cells for humans have 23 chromosomes. Does that make sense? A lot of people get lost with that, but you have to have half the number of chromosomes. Okay, because you can't keep increasing the number of chromosomes. So here's spermatogenesis. This is mitosis of spermatogonia. One stays a stem cell, one goes to your primary spermatocyte. that we are always generating more stem cells so sperm can develop throughout your life. So then you get your primary spermatocyte. Primary spermatocyte goes to your secondary spermatocyte, forming two daughter cells. Those still have 46 chromosomes. This is the same as mitosis. The next step after the secondary spermatocytes, each one of these develops into two without duplication of chromosomes. That way the chromosomes are split in half. So each one of these is called a haploid. It only has 23 chromosomes. That's all we have here. And the genetic material comes from paternal and maternal. It's mixed because we're not duplicating chromosomes anymore. We're taking parts of each one. So you're getting a great genetic diversity, which is extremely important in evolutionary traits. Okay? It allows certain genetic traits to carry on through family lines. Okay? Now, once these spermatids are formed, they mature into sperm and develop a head, a neck, and a tail. A head, a body, and tail. Okay? That's the difference between meiosis and mitosis. Mitosis is 46 chromosomes, complete cells. Meiosis is the development of haploids, 23 chromosomes. Okay, so spermatogenesis. Spermatids, once you have the spermatids form now, okay, they're going to form what's called spermatozoan. Spermatozoan, okay, spermatogenesis is a maturing process of the spermatozoan, which form after the spermatids, okay? So while the spermatids are maturing, they become embedded in what's called nurse cells, okay? So upon maturation, the spermatids, now sperm cells, enter the lumen of the seminiferous tubules where they were developing around. So now these spermatids feed into the seminiferous tubules where they can start to mature. Okay, they go around these nurse cells. What the nurse cells do is provide support for the maturation of these sperms. Just like the neuroglial cells provide support for our nervous system, the nurse cells provide support for our sperm to develop. And it maintains the blood testes barrier to make sure certain things cannot get into the sperm cells. They develop certain pathogens, other teratogenic products, things like that, can't get into the sperm that gets passed on. Okay, nurse cells support spermatogenesis and they support spermiogenesis. Okay, the development of sperm and the maturation of sperm. They secrete inhibin. They secrete two things. They secrete inhibin and they secrete androgen binding protein. Are both secreted by nurse cells. Okay, inhibin controls the rate of sperm formation, can slow it down if it gets too fast. So it controls how fast sperm are developing. Okay. And the androgen binding protein, that's just what it says. Androgen is testosterone. Testosterone is an androgen. It binds the testosterone so the testosterone can have its effect. Okay. So it binds testosterone within the seminiferous tubules. So the testosterone, we can have an effect on spermiogenesis and allow the sperm to develop. Okay. So nurse cells support everything, keep a blood-brain barrier, and they secrete inhibin, and they secrete ABP, androgen binding protein, which binds the testosterone that's produced to the sperm cells so they develop correctly and slows or controls your rate of sperm formation. Okay. These are a picture of your spermatids as they're developing, feeding in the seminiferous tubules. This is spermatogonia, and you see those haploid cells forming, and these are dividing ones, just like mitosis. You see the different division process. Okay. But in the secondary spermatocytes, they're just dividing, without replicating the chromosomes. And these are the nursing cells. The nursing cells are the larger cells here. Okay. Each spermatozoan has three areas when it develops fully, when it matures. There's a head, there's a neck, and there's a tail. Okay, three parts of a sperm. The chromosomes are always found in the head. No exceptions. I very rarely say no exceptions. So chromosomes are always found in the head of the sperm cells. Okay. They also contain a cap, a chromosomal cap, which is a covering over the head that controls hyaluronidase enzyme. Okay. When the sperm meets the egg has a coating over it. The sperm can't do anything. When the sperm hits it, it breaks the chromosome that had on top of it, releases the enzyme hyaluronidase. Hyaluronidase dissolves the coating over the egg so the sperm can inject its genetic code, its chromosomes, into the egg for fertilization. Okay, So the head of the chromosome contains two things. The head of the sperm contains your chromosomes, and it has an acrosomal cap, a covering that contains hyaluronidase acid that dissolves the coating of the egg when the sperm penetrates it. So the sperm can inject its chromosomes into the egg and have fertilization. Now the middle piece, or the neck of the sperm, is filled with mitochondria. What do mitochondria do? They're the powerhouse of the cell, right? They produce ATP, they produce energy. For the sperm to move, that little flagella has to move really quick. It takes lots of energy. So the whole middle section, the whole neck of this sperm is all dedicated to energy production. It's all dedicated to mitochondria. Okay. And the tail is a little flappy thing, little flagellum, just like a large cilia that we talked about. And it just beats back and forth. And those are the three parts of the sperm: the head, the neck, and the tail. Each one is specific for a certain function. But the head of the chromosome, the head of the sperm is a place that all the chromosomes are contained. Okay. And you can see how the sperm developed. This is the spermatid at week 1, and this is the mature sperm right here. You have your head, you have your neck, and you have your tail. Okay. You can see this is the acrosomal cap, which contains hyaluronidase acid. Okay. And the chromosomes are inside the head of the sperm. Okay. And that's what sperm looks like. Here's your head, here's the neck, and there's the tail, the flagellum. All right, as they develop, it goes into the epididymis. That's where the testes and all the seminiferous tubules, they straighten out. The Reedy's testes feed into the epididymis. The epididymis feeds in the ductus deferens, or the vas deferens, and the vas deferens feeds into the urethra through the ejaculatory duct. Okay, so the epididymis. Sperm cells move from the seminiferous tubules, okay, to the epididymis. And the epididymis mature a little longer. The epididymis also has 3 parts. Everything has 3 parts in the human body. Okay, so the epididymis has a head, a body, and a tail, just like the sperm cells. Okay, the head of the epididymis is the beginning. That's where the epididymis meets the seminiferous tubules. Okay, and the Reedy's testes into the epididymis. Okay, so the epididymis head receives spermatozoa from the efferent ducts, outgoing ducts. It both coils through the body, and at the tail, it feeds into the ductus deferens, to the vas deferens. Okay, so the head of the epididymis is the beginning, where the spermatozoa come in from these efferent ducts from the seminiferous tubules. The body, these pass through it, they coil through the body, where the spermatozoa mature a little bit more. Then they go to the tail. The tail is where it meets the ductus deferens to feed it on out into the ejaculatory duct, into the urethra. What does the epididymis do? It monitors the composition of fluid in the seminiferous tubules. It recycles damaged spermatozoa. If it finds one that are malfunctioned or damaged, it recycles it, breaks them down so it can reuse the parts again. It stores spermatozoa for further maturation, roughly 2 weeks to pass through the epididymis. Mature sperm cells are not active until they get what's called capacitated. So once the sperm cells are developed, they're still not active until they undergo a process called capacitation. Once they have been capacitated, then they can fertilize an egg. Okay, what capacitation is? Okay, sperm cells become motile when mixed with secretions from the seminal glands. The little tail starts to wag. Okay, become capable of fertilization when they're exposed to the female reproductive tract. So inside the male body, the sperm are not capable of reproduction. They only become capable of reproduction. They only become capacitated once exposed to the female reproductive tract, once deposited, okay, into the vagina of the female. Then exposed to the reproductive tract, then they become capacitated and they become active and they become fertile. Okay, so here's your epididymis. Okay, these are here's the seminiferous tubules right here. Feeds into the Reedy's testes and the mediastinal area, and this feeds to your efferent ductules. Okay, your outgoing ductules. Okay, and this is the head of the epididymis. All these coiled areas. Okay, and that's when the sperm tries to mature. It takes 2 weeks to travel through the body. Okay, and once it reaches the end of the body, it goes into the tail. The tail connects directly here to the, where's the vas deferens? Here you go, ductus deferens. Okay, this is your ductus deferens right here coming up. Okay, so the head of the epididymis connects to the efferent ductules, the straight tubers and the seminiferous tubules. The body, they travel through, undergo maturation. At the tail of the epididymis, it connects to the ductus deferens, where the sperm exit. Okay. Ductus deferens, also is called the vas deferens. Same thing, don't let it confuse you. Okay. So it begins, the vas deferens begins at the tail of the epididymis. Okay. The vas deferens, or the ductus deferens, ascends into the abdominal cavity through the inguinal canal. The inguinal canal is also the canal where the testes descended. Okay, once they mature inside the body, they descend through the inguinal canal. That same canal is where the epididymis, or the vas deferens, runs through. It curves around your urinary bladder and ends up in the ureter. It curves around the urinary bladder and ureter and ends up in the prostate gland. Okay, descends back and through the prostate gland. So before it enters the prostate gland, it expands, goes to the ampulla and becomes the ejaculatory duct. Okay, so it comes into the back of the urethra, where there's an ampulla, which becomes your ejaculatory duct. The ejaculatory duct then enters into the prostate gland as the prostatic urethra. Okay, so you can see how it comes through. This is the vas deferens, the ductus deferens right here. Comes up around the ureter, around the urinary bladder, comes in right here to the ejaculatory duct, feeds into the ejaculatory duct and gets released into the urethra at the prostate gland. Okay. Again, here's your ductus deferens wrapped around behind it, comes down. This is the ejaculatory duct, and you see the swelling. Whenever there's swelling in a gland like that, it's called the ampulla. An ampulla just means there's swelling, a larger area. You have an ampulla in the ear canal. We have an ampulla in the ejaculatory duct. We have an ampulla in the fallopian tubes. Okay, so ampulla just means a swollen area, a larger area. Okay, feeds into the ejaculatory duct and feeds into the prostatic urethra. And that's where the sperm comes out when it gets ejaculated. The urethra, we talked about this last time. In the male, there's 3 divisions. The urethra in the female is just one. It's called the urethra. In the male, there's a prostatic urethra, or membranous urethra, and a spongy urethra. The prostatic urethra runs through the prostate gland. The membranous urethra, okay, is the merging where the prostatic urethra and the ejaculatory duct merge. Okay, and it's where you have the smooth muscle attachment right in there. And the spongy urethra passes through the penis and travels the length of the penis. So there are 3 divisions of the urethra. Okay. Again, here's your prostatic urethra, your membranous urethra, and your spongy urethra. And the membranous urethra, as it goes through the bulbourethral gland. And that's your membranous urethra. It's a very small section of it. There's accessory glands in the male. There's 3 of them. There's the seminal glands, prostate gland, and the bulbourethral gland. Okay, and that's where they're located. Here's your seminal glands. Here's the prostate gland, and the bulbourethral gland is right below that. Okay, the seminal glands. This is what each of the individual glands do. The seminal gland produces 60% of the semen volume. Okay, so most of the volume of your semen is controlled or produced by the seminal gland. Consists of a high concentration of fructose, prostaglandins, and clotting factors. Okay. The contents empty into the ductus deferens. Okay, that's what the seminal gland empties its products into. The prostate gland. Okay. This empties into the prostatic urethra. Okay, this produces 20 to 30% of the semen volume. It's weakly acidic, and the secretions consist of seminal plasmin, okay, which is an antibiotic, which helps prevent urinary tract infections in males, as secreted by the prostate gland. The bulbourethral gland only contributes to 5% of the semen volume. Like I said, most of it is in the seminal gland, 60%. These are paired glands. There's one on the right, one on the left. Okay, they're located at the base of the penis, and their secretions are thick, sticky, alkaline mucus. Again, this is alkaline. The other ones are acidic. This is the alkaline one. It neutralizes urinary acids because it's alkaline that remain in the urethra from the acidic products of the seminal glands and the prostate gland. Okay, so this helps to neutralize it because it's alkaline. And it also provides lubrication for the tip of the penis. Okay, so here's your accessory glands again. These are your seminal glands. Most of your semen production is there. Your prostate gland and your bulbourethral gland. Okay, in semen, each ejaculation releases 2 to 5 milliliters of semen. Okay. Spermatozoa inside each ejaculation. There's 20 million to 100 million per milliliter. There's a lot of those spermatozoans in there. The seminal fluid, like we talked about, 60% is from the seminal gland. Roughly 30% is from the prostate gland, 5% from the bulbourethral gland, another 5% comes out from the epididymis as it's released. But the three glands, the biggest one is the seminal gland. That releases up almost 60%, more than half of your seminal fluid. Some of the enzymes that are released in the seminal fluid, in the semen, help dissolve vaginal mucus and acts as an antibiotic to prevent infections. Right? The penis has 3 areas, just like everything else in the body. There's a root, a body, and a glans. The root is what attaches to the ramen of the ischia, in the pelvic bone. The body of the penis consists of erectile tissue, and the glans is the external genitalia. Okay, it's expanded distal end of the penis that surrounds your external urethral orifice, where urine or semen exits from the penis. Okay, consists of 3 cylindrical columns of erectile tissues and blood vessels. There's 2 corpora cavernosa, one on each side. Okay, so there's a right and a left, corpora cavernosa, and there's one that runs down the middle of corpus spongiosum. That gives you 3 cylindrical columns. 2 are corpus cavernosa, 1 is corpus spongiosum. Okay. The corpora cavernosa is a deep artery of the penis, is in the center of the tissue. This runs through the center. Each corpus cavernosum extends posteriorly, forming the crus of the penis. That's where it binds to the pelvic bone. Each crus is bound to the ramus of the ischium. Okay, the corpus spongiosum is single, and it runs through the spongy urethra. Okay, it runs through the length of the body of the penis. Okay, so here's the crus of the pelvic bone. This is the ischial ramus. That's where the base of the penis connects to. Okay, the erectile tissue runs through the body of the penis. The corpus spongiosum runs in the center as it runs down. The corpora cavernosa runs on right and left sides. Then you have the glans, which is the distal tip, and the external urethral orifice, where the sperm exits. You can see the diagram there, how it runs through. Here's the crus of the penis, where it attaches onto the ischium of the ramus of the pelvic bone there. You have erectile tissue. Remember, there's 2 types, corpus spongiosum, one on each side. Corpus cavernosa runs through the middle. Okay, you got your spongy urethra, the glans, and the external urethral orifice. Okay. You can see that as a cross section here. You can see it real well. You can see the corpus cavernosa. You can see how you have a right and the left side, and then the corpus spongiosum. runs right down the center. Those are the ones that fill with blood and allow for an erection to occur. So erection of the penis. This is the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, think about it. When you want an erection, you have to relax. You need the parasympathetic nervous system to function. Okay? Because the sympathetic is your fight or flight, your parasympathetic is your relaxation, right? You don't want to start a fight, then get an erection. That's not a real good thing to do. So the sympathetic system does not activate the erection. That's why the parasympathetic takes over. That's where you get your erection. Okay? You just think about it logically of what you want to happen. Smooth muscles and arterial walls have to relax, and the arterial vessels dilate. So the blood vessels start to dilate, and the erectile tissues fill with blood. Okay, they channel blood into the corpora cavernosa, and they come engorged with blood, and then an erection occurs. Okay, semen release and ejaculation. The sympathetic nervous system causes peristaltic action in your ductus deferens, your seminal glands, your prostate glands, and your bulbourethral glands. So once the erection occurs, then the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. You get that energy, the ductus deferens, the seminal glands, prostate gland, bulbourethral glands, of that peristaltic action pushing the spermatozoa into the area. Okay, and then ejaculation can occur. So ejaculation is sympathetic nervous system triggered it. Erection is the parasympathetic nervous system. Female reproductive system has ovaries, fimbriae, uterine tube. Uterine tubes are the exact same things as fallopian tubes. No difference. They just change the name to make it more interesting. Okay, so uterine, don't get confused. Vas deferens is ductus deferens. Uterine tubes are fallopian tubes. Okay, you have a uterus and you have a vagina. Okay, so this is the gonad. The gonad is the ovary. Fits up here. Okay, then you have your uterine tube that feeds down into the uterus. Okay, the uterus has three layers: a perimetrium, which is your outer layer, a myometrium, which is your muscular layer, inner layer, and then the endometrium, which is the inside layer. That's what sloughs off when you have a period. Okay. At the end of the uterus is the cervix. The cervix feeds into the vagina. Okay. The vagina feeds into your external genitalia, your labium minus and your labium major. Okay. That's the overall view of it. Again, here's your uterine tube. This is your ovary right here. This is a fimbriae. These are all these little fibers right here. When the uterus ejects an egg, these little fibers catch it and trap it and move it into the uterine tube. This egg passes through the uterine tube into the uterus itself. Okay. This is a cadaver section of it. And again, you can see the ovary, little tube right there. This is the uterus here, right in this body here. You can see the endometrium. The myometrium is this big, thick muscle layer, and the perimetrium is on the outside of it. And then it feeds into the cervix here and into the vagina, out into the opening. All right. Numerous structures hold the ovaries in place. Okay, it's anchored extremely well in the body. Okay, it holds the ovaries, the uterine tube, and the uterus all together in their specific spots. And it uses the broad ligament, mesiosalpinx, mesovarium, ovarian ligament, suspensory ligaments, round ligament, and uterosacral ligaments. Okay, there's a bunch of ligaments that hold the uterus, ovaries, and the fallopian tubes, uterine tubes in place. Okay, so here's your uterus. This is your ovary right here. You have an ovarian ligament that suspends it right here. You have a mesovarium ligament that suspends over the top of the mesosurface. You have a suspensory ligament which suspends it by the ovarian tubes. Okay, you have a broad ligament that connects this whole area right in here to the uterus. Okay, and you have a uterosacral ligament that comes up in between here behind this one right here. Okay, so there's a bunch of ligaments that hold this thing in place, helps to stabilize this whole structure. The ovary is an organ, consists of a cortex and a medulla, like all organs. All organs, the cortex is the outer layer, the medulla is the inner layer. That was the same for the kidney, suprarenal glands, whatever we talked about. Cortex is always your outer layer, medulla is always your inner layer. The gamete production, the egg productions occur in the cortex. They do not occur in the medulla. So your egg production, your gametes for your female reproductive system occur in the cortex of the ovaries. Right? So here's the ovary here. Here's your mesovarium ligament. Your broad ligament comes up and your mesophallus comes in here. This is your ovarian hilum. Remember what a hilum is? A hilum is where you have an entrance point, blood vessels, arteries, veins, nerves, lymphatics. That's where they enter into the organ. And they enter into the medullary cavity. This is the inside. The cortical layer, you can see your egg development. Here's a mature follicle that's developing. You can see all the egg nest, germinal epithelium. You can see all the eggs that are developing there. Remember, the eggs develop in the cortex of the uterus. The blood vessels, lymphatic drainage, nervous system all enter through the hilum into the medullary part of it, into the medulla. Ovarian cycle, oogenesis. Oogenesis is egg development. That's what it is. So oogenetic production of female gametes. Okay, it used to be thought that it begins before birth, but they're not sure now. There's a lot of research that's showing different types of development. They haven't narrowed it down yet. With the ovarian cycle, at puberty, okay, you produce follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary gland. That initiates the cycle of puberty. Okay. Primordial follicles develop into primary follicles. So the primordial eggs develop into primary follicles, eggs. Okay. Several layers of the eggs form around these follicles. This becomes a zona pellucida. Zona pellucida, this layer consists of granulosa cells. Okay. These cells form interdigitating microvilli to the oocyte. So they invade into the area and interdigitate within the oocyte. Okay. These cells start to produce estrogen. Okay. The layers that surround the zona pellucida is called the thecal cells. Thecal cells also release estrogen. Okay. Remember, males are releasing testosterone, females releasing estrogen. Okay. What estrogen does, estrogen is like testosterone to males, estrogen is to females. It stimulates muscle and bone growth, maintains female secondary sexual characteristics, okay, affects your sexual related behavior and sex drives, maintains the function of your reproductive glands and organs. So that's maintain everything just like testosterone in the male, and initiates repair and growth of the uterine lining. Remember, the uterine lining is sloughed off during their menstrual cycles. Okay. The primary follicles develop into secondary follicles. Secondary follicles enlarge, get fluid production by the follicular cells in the area. Okay. Secondary follicles become tertiary follicles. These are the mature follicles. Okay. The follicle is large enough to cause the ovarian walls to stretch. So as it becomes a tertiary follicle, it gets bigger and bigger, and it stretches the walls of that uterus. And once it stretches the walls of the uterus to the point where the egg can pop through. Okay, so the tertiary follicle is preparing to ovulate the egg. Okay, ovulation where the gamete is released. It goes out of the uterus. The follicular cells around the oocyte are now called the corona radiata. This is the surrounding around that egg now. Okay, there's a rising concentration of luteinizing hormone. Okay, this causes weakening of the follicular wall. So the egg is released into the uterine or fallopian tube. That's how it works. And you can see the different follicle cells developing. This is a zona pellucida around it. You can hear this is a primary oocyte. Secondary oocyte, see how much larger this has gotten now as it stretches the walls of the uterus. Okay. So after you release the egg, the empty follicle is called the corpus luteum. And don't forget the egg undergoes meiosis also. It just didn't go through. It's the same steps as in the male. It does not undergo meiosis. So each egg only has 23 chromosomes also. So there's 23 in the egg, 23 in the sperm, giving you 46 when they meet. Now this corpus luteum that's produces progesterone. Progesterone is what gets the female ready for implantation, ready for pregnancy. It conditions the uterus and the endometrial layer to be able to adhere or grab that egg as it comes through. Okay? That's what gets your body ready for pregnancy. It's the progesterone. If the pregnancy does not occur, this corpus luteum decomposes about 12 days after release of the oocyte. And that becomes a corpus albicans. And that's the sloughing off from the uterus to form the period. Okay. At puberty, you have about 200,000 primordial egg cells. Okay. At age 40, okay, you only about 500 will have been ovulated. That's how many you're going to use. The rest of them decompose, break down. So you roughly use 500 of the 200,000 primordial follicles. Okay. The uterine tubes, also called fallopian tubes, have 4 regions. They have what's called an infundibulum, an ampulla, an isthmus, and a uterine part. Okay, infundibulum is the beginning where it connects to the ovary. Ampulla, what did ampulla mean? We just talked about that.
Swelling.
Swelling, large area. So the uterine tube comes up, whoosh, and forms a large area. This is your ampulla right here, a swelling area, a large area. Okay, in this area, this is where fertilization occurs. Fertilization does not occur in the uterus. Fertilization occurs in the uterine tube, in the ampulla, the swollen area. It's the distal 2/3 of the uterine tube. That's where fertilization occurs. It's a misconception that occurs in the uterus. So here's your uterus. Okay. Here's the ovary. This is the fimbra, the connected. This is the infundibulum, the beginning. This is the ampulla, the swollen area. And this is the isthmus that the egg travels down. Fertilization occurs right here, right in the ampulla area. Okay. Does not occur in the uterus. The egg, once it's fertilized, travels down the isthmus into the uterus and implants in the uterus. That's where you get ever hear of a tubal pregnancy? That's where the egg, because the egg is fertilized in the uterine tube, sometimes you get an implant there. And it has to be aborted. Okay, so you can't get the nourishment that it needs from there. That's what's called the tubal pregnancy, when the egg implants into the walls of the uterine tube. And you have to get rid of that. So the infundibulum was our beginning of the uterine tube. There's numerous fimbriae. Those are the little fibers that sit out there and collect the egg when it's released. Okay? They contain cilia that brings the egg into the uterine tube. The ampulla is the swelling where fertilization occurs. The isthmus is a path that it travels down toward the uterus. And the uterine part is the last part that opens up into the uterus from the fallopian tubes. Those are your 4 sections. Okay? The uterine tube consists of ciliated and non-ciliated columnar cells. Has layers of smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is used to peristaltic action, to push the eggs through the uterine tube to get it to the uterus. Successful fertilization occurs 12 to 24 hours after ovulation. Okay, and it occurs in the distal 2/3 of the uterine tube, the ampulla region. Okay, so fertilization occurs 12 to 14 hours after the egg is ovulated, brought into the uterine tube. Okay, and it occurs in the ampulla area, the back 2/3 of that uterine tube, where fertilization occurs. The uterus, okay, provides protection for the embryo, provides nutritional support for the embryo, provides a means to remove waste produced by the embryo. The uterus is specifically designed to support, nourish, and develop the embryo, the fertilized egg. The uterus, overall size, it's a pear shape, okay? 7.5 centimeters long, 5 centimeters diameter, weighs 30 to 40 grams. We talked about some of the suspensory ligaments of the uterus. There's a bunch of them holding that in place. Okay, these are in addition to the various regions of the broad ligament. You also have the uterosacral ligament, the round ligament, and the cardinal ligaments. Okay, the uterosacral ligament extends from the lateral edge of the uterus to the anterior face of the sacrum. The round ligament extends from the lateral edge of the uterus to just inferior to the base of the uterine tubes. Okay, it passes through the inguinal canal to the connective tissue of the external genitalia. And the cardinal ligaments extend from the base of the uterus, okay, and vagina to the lateral walls of the pelvis. Okay, and here you can see the different supporting ligaments. Okay, so here's your uterosacral ligament extending from the uterus. This is the suspensory ligament of the uterus, and this is all the cardinal ligament right here. This whole area extends. Okay, and again, you have the round ligament of the uterus and the ovarian ligament that extends. And you see the same thing on a cadaver section. This is the uterus here. You can see all the different supporting ligaments in that area. The uterus consists of a body, a fundus, a cervix, an external os, a cervical canal, uterine canal, and an internal os. So here's the uterus. You talk about the different, like the broad ligaments, something like that hold in place. This is the body of the uterus. Okay. The fundus is the top part, the most superficial portion. Okay. This is the uterine cavity. Okay. Where the embryo or the fertilized egg implants. This is the cervix. The cervix at the base or the opposite end of the fundus of the uterus. You have an internal os, which is an internal opening, and you have an external os, which is your external opening of the cervix. And you got your cervical canal, which connects the internal os and the external os, openings of the internal orifice. Okay. The uterine wall, like we said, has 3 layers. Okay. There's an endometrium, which is your inner layer. This is where the egg implants. That's the layer that sloughs off during a period. You have the myometrium. The myometrium is your, you have thick muscular layer. You have longitudinal, circular, and oblique smooth muscles. It can contract in all different directions. And then you have the perimetrium, which is your outer layer. So the endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium. Okay, and this is the uterus here. This is your endometrium. This is the inner layer right here. This thick layer right here, this is your myometrium. This is all muscle tissue. Okay, and your layer here, this is your perimetrium. This is the outer layer. Okay, so 3 histological layers of the uterus: the perimetrium, myometrium, endometrium. Oops, I go too far. Wait a minute. There we go. Blood supply. Uterine arteries arise from the internal iliac arteries. Okay, ovarian arteries also arise from the abdominal aorta, okay, that are inferior to the renal arteries. So once the abdominal aorta passes the renal arteries, then it's already branched into the uterus, into the ovaries. Okay, so here's your uterine arteries and veins coming in, and here's your ovarian arteries and veins coming in. Okay. Endometrium. Endometrium is the layer the egg implants into. Remember, it's the inner layer of the uterus. It has 2 basic divisions inside the endometrium. There's a functional layer and there's a basilar layer. The functional layer is the layer closest to the uterine cavity. Contains uterine glands, undergoes cyclical changes due to hormones. That's the layer of the endometrium that sloughs off, is your functional layer. Your basal layer is one closest to the myometrium. That remains relatively constant. Okay, so the endometrium has 2 layers. The outer layer of it, away from the myometrium, is your functional layer that sloughs off. Your basal layer remains fairly stable. Okay. So again, you have your endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium. And there's 2 different layers: a functional layer, and there's a basilar layer of the endometrium. The uterine cycle is the menstrual cycle. There's 3 phases. 3 phases to your menstrual cycle. There's a proliferative phase, a secretory phase, and then there's menses. Right. Yeah, the menarche. Menarche is the first uterine cycle at puberty. That's what it's called. So menarche is the first uterine cycle. The proliferative phase is the endometrial lining thickens, preparing the body for the implantation of a fertilized egg. So the endometrium is the inner lining of the uterus. The functional layer is what changes between the functional and the basal layer, and that gets ready for the egg to be implanted. That's your proliferative phase. It's getting ready for it. Your secretory phase. The endometrial glands enlarge and blood vessels elongate. Okay. An egg is ready to implant if the egg is present. That's what's going to form your umbilical cord, and it's getting ready to implant around that egg to provide nourishment for the egg and then provide a way to get nutrients to the developing fetus and waste away from it. So the secretory phase is all those blood vessels are enlarged and getting ready for that. Okay. And then you have menses. Menses begins due to a decrease in progestin and estrogen levels because the egg didn't implant or didn't show up. Okay. So you decrease progesterone, decrease estrogen. This causes a constriction of those blood vessels. Okay. The loss of the excess endometrial cells, and that's what sloughs off the functional layer of the endometrium. And that's menstruation. Okay. And menopause is the last uterine cycle. Okay. So menarche was the first, menopause is the last uterine cycle. And there's 3 phases to it. Okay. Again, this is the light microscope picture. You can see the uterine glands right here starting to enlarge. This is your basilar layer. This is layer that stays the same. And this is the functional layer of the endometrium. Okay, that's the one that changes. Again, see your functional layer here. This is where all your changes occur. Basilar layer is right by the myometrium. That lays relatively constant. Okay, and there's your secretory phase where everything sloughs off. You can see all the blood vessels constricting back again, and all the functional layers are going to slough off there. Okay, these are the uterine glands. You see how they develop inside the functional layer. Okay, the vagina. Vagina extends from the cervix of the uterus, that's the ending point of it, okay, to the external genitalia. The vagina is roughly 7.5 to 9 centimeters in length. The cervix projects from the uterus to the vaginal canal. The edge of the cervix forms a recess, what's called the fornix. Your urethra, vaginal canal, and rectum are all in close proximity on the female anatomy. Okay, because here's your urethra coming down here from the urinary bladder. Here's the vagina coming down from the uterus, and here's the anus or the rectum coming down from the large intestines. Okay, and this is the cervical area of the uterus, and it feeds right into the vaginal canal. And the tip of that right here is your fornix. Okay. Vagina serves 3 functions: elimination of menstrual fluids. It receives the penis and holds spermatozoon before they enter to the uterus. And it serves as a passageway for the fetus during vaginal birth. Vagina contains a normal population of bacteria. Bacteria provide the nutrients found in the cervical mucus. So bacteria create what's called an acid environment. Okay? Reduces the growth of many pathogenic organisms. Okay, the acid environment prevents several infections. It also reduces sperm motility. So there's buffers, some of the alkaline solutions found in seminal fluid that counteract this acidic environment, so the sperm don't die off and can function, it can move. Okay, the vagina is lined with stratified squamous epithelium, just like you'd fix. Stratified, multiple layers. Squamous, because there's insults in that area. Okay, when relaxed, the tissue forms rugae. Okay, that allows it to expand during other times. Okay, the rugae are just little folds that allow it to expand later on. The lamina propria is thick and elastic. Okay, the muscular layer is continuous with the myometrium of the uterus. That's the muscular layer of the vaginal wall. Okay, so there's your lamina propria, like the basement membrane of it. These are your smooth muscle fibers that run through here. Okay, and this is a stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, the external genitalia on the female reproductive system. You have the vulva, the vestibule, labia minor, the clitoris, prepuce, labia major, mons pubis, and the hymen when it's present. Okay, the vulva is the entire genital area. The vestibule is the opening into the vagina surrounded by the labia minor. The clitoris is at the superior portion and it contains erectile tissue. Labia major and the mons pubis forms your lateral and superior edges of the vestibule. Okay, so there's the mons pubis, superior layer of the vestibule. You have your clitoris up here, which has a prepuce and a glans. That's your erectile tissue, your superior area right there. You have the vestibule, which is your opening. Okay, the labia minor and the labia major. The labia minor is on the outside, labia major is inside. And then you got the hymen here. And you know the hymen is torn open. It's a layer that covers over that. Okay. Mammary glands. Mammary consists of lobes of mammary glands. Okay, these are where milk develops and leaves those lobes for the infant when it sucks on the breast. You have lactiferous ducts. Lactiferous ducts take the milk and feed it into the nipple of the breast. You have the nipple, the areola, which is the area that surrounds the nipple, and you have suspensory ligaments that keep the breast firm and suspended upwards. So these are the different lobules right here, the mammary glands. You see all these different lobules. These are where we produce the milk. Okay. Once the milk's produced, it travels down through these glands into what's called lactiferous ducts. Okay. Lactiferous ducts feeds to the nipple. The areola is the dark area around the nipple, and lactiferous sinus is a storage area where this milk is formed as it comes down towards the nipple. Okay, so during pregnancy, mammary gland ducts become mitotically active. Okay. They undergo a lot of mitosis, more glandular cells that can produce, producing milk. Prolactin, growth hormone, and human placental lactose, okay, trigger the mammary glands to produce milk. They're fully developed about 6 months of pregnancy. Okay, the breasts are larger, they're more full of milk, and right about the 6 month pregnancy, they become their maximum development. Milk is released when the infant sucks on it. So the pressure when the infant grabs hold releases oxytocin. Oxytocin comes from the pituitary gland. Oxytocin causes a contraction of lactiferous ducts and ejects the milk. So the baby nurses, puts pressure on the nipple. Nipple stimulates, the stimulation goes into the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland releases oxytocin. Oxytocin causes a contraction of those ducts, lactiferous ducts, and then eject your milk. Okay. This is a light microscope picture of a mammary gland. You can see all the connective tissue. This is lactiferous ducts. And you can see these little areas right inside of here. That's where milk is being formed, where milk is stored. It's the only one I see right there. Oh, there we go. Here's milk. This is all the milk right here. You can see milk being stored inside the ducts right here, inside the lactiferous duct. Okay. Again, you get your secretory, alveoli, your milk, lactiferous ducts, connective tissue that supports it. So upon fertilization, okay, the egg becomes what's called, okay, becomes a blastocyst. It becomes a zygote at first, and it develops and starts to form into a blastocyst. And that eventually implants in the endometrial lining, the endometrial wall of the uterus. A placenta is going to form. The placenta releases human chorionic gonadotropin. The human chorionic gonadotropin keeps the corpus luteum active, which produces progesterone. Okay. An active corpus luteum maintains a thick endometrial lining. It doesn't slope off, and maintains a healthy environment where that egg can become nourished and start to develop. Right? In 3 months, the corpus luteum starts to decompose, but a thick endometrial line is going to continue because the placenta that's now developed, the placenta has developed, produces progesterone. Progesterone keeps your endometrial lining thick and helps maintain the development of the egg. The placenta produces a couple other things too. It produces relaxin and human placental lactogen. So those two hormones are produced by the placenta. Okay. The relaxin increases pelvic flexibility for during delivery. So in the pelvic area where the pubic symphysis is, it increases that flexibility so the baby can travel down the birth canal. Okay. And it causes dilation of the cervix during birth. Okay. That's what relaxin does. Human placental lactogen prepares the mammary glands for milk production. So you're preparing it for milk production, and you're getting the body ready by relaxing the pubic symphysis and dilation of the cervix during birth. So there's two hormones released by the umbilical cord, relaxin and human placental lactogen.
So when labor is induced, what are they giving in the hospital? Like the, if they give you an injection to induce labor?
Right. It's not oxytocin. It's
Pitocin.
what's that?
Pitocin.
Pitocin. It's a Pitocin drip. It's the same thing as oxytocin, which causes a contraction effect when the milk comes out. It's Pitocin. They give you that as a drip. It's called a Pitocin drip. It starts to cause contractions. You know, when they do that, the contractions are a lot harder than they normally would be. They're a lot more painful for the female, but it's a lot stronger contraction. But it's Pitocin is what they give. Thanks, Jonathan. I was drawing a blank on the term. It's usually done in a drip. All right, so at menopause, after all of this, in menopause, estrogen levels start to decline. Okay, when any estrogen declines, it reduces the size of the uterus, reduces the size of the breast, you get thinning of vaginal walls, you get weakening of supportive tissues and reproductive organs, get osteoporosis, and you get hot flashes. Okay, typically between age 45 to 55. And you'll know when your significant other is going through that. No doubt about it. They make hormone replacement therapy to help ease menopause, but it's quite a life change.
But that hormone replacement therapy that you were talking about has significant side effects
Yes,
with it, like
it does.
cancerous, right?
It can at certain levels. It depends on what you're doing with it. If certain people need that estrogen levels because of osteoporosis, because your bones become real thin, okay, but hormone replacement therapy has some drawbacks. I don't know the incidence of cancer associated with it. I will look that up though and find out. I don't remember the incidence of it.
Or is it that one of the, I can't remember. I think it's either that or it's a chemotherapy drug. Because my wife was going to have to take it before her hysterectomy or after. I can't remember which. So
Right.
I was just curious.
It's probably afterwards. I don't think there's a higher level of cancer associated with it. I'm trying to think, but there is some side effects with it. It's if you have, it can cause heart problems. I know if you have existing heart conditions like PVCs, left ventricular hypertrophy. I know if you take hormone replacement therapy, that can really exaggerate those conditions with the heart. I'm not sure about cancer things, but I'll double check. I'll look it up.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, male climacteric, with the same thing produces in the male. Okay, testosterone levels begin to decline, not as rapid as estrogen. Estrogen's a real big drop with menopause. It's a real rapid decline. Males occur gradually between age 50 and 60, and the reduction in sexual activity.